had a theory about what came next. I want to be transparent about that, because it matters to how I am going to tell this story. When the Blackbears came, when that battle ended the way it did, and the Greymanes scattered across Pywel like ash from a fire, I was certain I knew what Kliff would do. He had a name to settle. Debts that were not the kind you forget. I was sure the next move was revenge. That the alliances, the camp, all of it, was infrastructure for a war he was quietly building toward. I was wrong. The morning after the fires were lit on Howling Hills, Kliff rode out before the camp had fully woken up. Not toward an enemy, not toward a score that needed settling. He went to find his people. The Greymanes had scattered. Some ran, some hid. Some ended up in places that no one who knew them would have predicted. Beggar camps, madhouses, manor houses under siege from men who dissolve into dust. They had been surviving, some of them barely. Kliff knew this, and the knowledge of it was apparently enough. The revenge could wait. The clan could not. I have been watching this man for a while now. I thought I had a read on him, what he values, what drives him, what he will and will not set aside. The morning after he built them a home, he went to bring them to it. I do not have a clean framework for that, so I will just tell you what happened. Marius had been living in the beggar camp. That is not a detail I am going to linger on because Marius would not want me to. But it is worth saying once that this is where one of the Greymanes had ended up. In a camp for people with nowhere else to go, gathering information the way he always has, through listening and patience and the particular skill of making himself useful in places where usefulness is the only currency that matters. He had a broken leg. He had intelligence. He had been waiting. They rode to Howling Hills together. And when Marius saw it, the camp, the land, the fires, the posts, he went quiet for a moment. The Marquis had given the Greymanes more than any of them had expected. More than Marius had allowed himself to hope for, living in that beggar camp. He did not say much, but he looked at it for a long time. Ross and Carl had found their own way to camp. They heard the Greymane camp was up. They heard Kliff was back, and they came. The first thing they did when they saw Marius was ask about his leg. Not, "Where have you been?" Not, "Are you all right?" Specifically, immediately, the leg. Marius endured this with the expression of a man who has been asked about his leg enough times that the concern has curdled into something closer to an insult. Once the leg discussion was concluded, and it took longer than Marius would have liked, he delivered what he had. Andrew and Naira had gone south. A count by the name of Alistair Grace, holding an estate called Glenbright Manor, had sent a protection request to the Greymanes. Something, or someone, was threatening him. A masked stranger. The details were thin, but the urgency of the request had not been. Andrew and Naira had gone to answer it. That was the last Marius had heard. He was more worried about a Greymane who was locked up in a place called St. Halssius House of Healing, which is what it called itself. Marius had heard about it through the beggar camp network. The Greymane in question had gotten drunk, had beaten a priest half to death, was now residing in St. Halssius as a patient. Marius was very clear that someone needed to handle this immediately. He said it in the way that people say things when they are unable to handle it themselves and find that fact deeply frustrating. Kliff assured he would look into St. Halssius. He rode out. The first thing that happened at St. Halssius was that they turned Kliff away. Entry required a pass. The pass was sold at a church back in Hernand. Kliff had just ridden from Howling Hills. The church was in the opposite direction. He did not go to the church. Just outside the gates, a group of women had been having a conversation that had probably been going on for some time. They were families of patients inside. They had not been allowed to see them. The policy of St. Halssius was that patients would emerge when they were cured, and not before. No visits, no letters that anyone could confirm were delivered. Just the promise that their people were being healed and would come out when the healing was done. They had also heard something else. Someone nearby was selling Halssius robes on the side. The robes that priests wore inside. The price was absurd, but the robes would get you past the guards. Kliff paid the steep price. St. Halssius was a spectacle on the inside. Two categories of people. Priests in robes, purposeful, efficient, going about their work with the calm of people who believe in what they are doing. Patients in white, some of them wearing silver helmets, some of them not. The patients wearing the silver helmets were calm. Genuinely calm, not the calm of sedation, but the calm of people who had been relieved of something. They greeted Kliff as he walked past. Warm, gracious, completely at peace. The patients without the helmets were crazy. The helmet, it seemed, was the treatment, and by visible evidence, it was working. I will note, even then, something about it felt wrong. A piece that arrives on schedule, delivered by a piece of metal on someone's head. I could not have articulated exactly what bothered me about it. Kliff kept moving. He found the corridor by following the noise. Patients were pressing in on a priest, not attacking yet, but close to it. One of them turned to Kliff and said, with the urgency of someone delivering a genuine warning, that someone inside the room at the end was about to be cleansed. The way he said it made cleansed sound like something that should not happen to anyone. He entered the room. 3 priests were already on the floor. Then something hit him from behind. He dropped the attacker, turned, looked. It was Jan. The last time Kliff had seen Jan was during the battle with the Blackbears. Jan had been thrown off a cliff. Kliff had seen it happen. The working assumption for everyone had been the obvious one. Jan was not dead. Jan had apparently survived the cliff, found his way to the nearest available trouble, gotten drunk, beaten a priest, and ended up here. This tracks for anyone who knew Jan. Jan told Kliff what St. Halssius actually was. They were not healing people. They were using the iron helmets to scramble their minds. Whatever the patients had been before they arrived, their memories, their personalities, the friction and difficulty that makes a person themselves, the helmets took it. What came out the other side was cooperative, grateful, at peace, and not entirely the same person who went in. The helmet was not a treatment. It was a replacement. Jan demonstrated. He found one of the priests, specifically one who had, during Jan's time as a patient, been scheduled to cleanse him. He dragged him out, put the helmet on him. The priest stopped struggling. He thanked Jan, sincerely. It was one of the more unsettling things Kliff had witnessed in a week that had already contained several unsettling things. Jan seemed satisfied. He had been wanting to do that for a while. They took a cart they found outside the gates and left. On the road, they caught each other up. Kliff on the quarry, the alliances, the camp. Jan on the cliff, the recovery, the drunk incident that landed him in St. Halssius, which he recounted without particular remorse. Then Jan saw a tavern. He said he needed a drink. He said he would find his way to camp afterward. He said this with the certainty of someone for whom a drink was not optional, but logistical. Kliff rode back to camp alone. He told Marius about Jan. Marius received the information the way you receive news about someone who has always been capable of surviving things they should not survive. Relieved? Unsurprised. Then Marius told Kliff about Andrew and Nara. He had no word from them, nothing. That was not like them. Naira especially. She was not the kind of person who went silent when there was nothing wrong. The silence meant something. Marius could feel it. Dwayne arrived at camp while Kliff was still processing the news about Andrew and Nara. He walked in, looked around, saw the camp, saw Marias, and immediately asked about the leg. Marias said something that was technically a response. Kliff rode south. He knew something was wrong before he reached the gate. The guards were dead at their positions, which meant whatever had come here had not announced itself and had not left anyone standing who could raise an alarm. The courtyard was where they hid him. Masked men. And they had a specific quality that separated them from anything Kliff had fought before. They could dissolve into dust, literally, and reappear somewhere else. An ambush designed around the assumption that a man who cannot track where his enemies are will eventually run out of good decisions. Kliff did not run out of good decisions. He killed them without much difficulty. Inside the manor, there was blood and bodies and the particular silence of a place where something terrible has recently finished happening. He found a surviving servant. The man was barely holding on, but he had words. The devil of the reed fields. And then, the Count, Naira, and Andrew had gotten out through a window. There was still a trail. Kliff followed it. The Count and the Greymanes had found a house close enough to reach, but far enough that the masked men had not caught them yet. The Count was hysterical, not quietly frightened, genuinely unraveling. He wanted the masked man dead. He said it the way desperate people say things, not as a request, but as a demand. The Greymanes needed to go and kill him. Now, immediately. He was insistent about this. The reasons behind his desperation were not yet clear. Then the sounds started outside. The guards who had been posted at the house, dying. Naira sent Andrew to check the door. The sword came through the wood first and stabbed Andrew in the stomach. Naira was at his side immediately, which left the Count standing alone and unguarded in the room. The dust came from nowhere and everywhere at the same time. And then the devil of the reed fields was in the room. He said, "Why so fearful? You look like you have seen a ghost." Then he said something about guilt, about whether it was guilt that was making the Count tremble. The Count said, "Please." He said, "Flesh and blood." He said, "My son." The devil killed him. This is the part that requires some context. The Count had a son with an unusual appearance and abilities. He thought of him as a freak of nature. The son just wanted some love from his parents. He had a servant take the boy to the reed fields. Leave him there. Never come back. The boy did not die in the reed fields. He became something else. Something that learned how to disappear into dust and reappear somewhere else. That gathered men around him who could do the same. That built a life out of the grudge that had been handed to him the day his father decided he was too strange to keep. He came back for one reason: revenge. I am not going to tell you how to feel about that. I did not know how to feel about it myself. The Count was not a good man. The son had been made into something by a cruelty that was not his fault. None of that makes the trail of bodies any smaller. Naira attacked him. She went in without hesitation, and she is not someone you dismiss lightly. He was stronger. She was losing ground when Kliff arrived. The devil looked at Kliff, held it for a moment, then retreated. Kliff sent Naira and Andrew back to Howling Hills. Andrew was still alive, needed to stay that way. He followed the trail alone. The path up the mountain was held by masked men. Not a handful. Enough to make the climb something other than a climb. They came in waves, and they used the dust in the same way the ones at the manor had. Appearing, disappearing. These were not ordinary men. The dust ability was real. It cost something to defend against, and they were disciplined about using it. Kliff was better. He had already learned the pattern once in the courtyard, and he applied what he had learned with the efficiency of someone who does not need to be shown the same thing twice. He cut his way up the mountain. At the top of the mountain was a reed field. Open, elevated, the kind of place that feels chosen rather than found. A shrine in the middle of it. And on the shrine, a doll that had clearly been made to resemble the devil. The proportions, the mask, the shape of it. Kliff picked up the doll. It turned to dust in his hands. He called the devil out. The devil came. And in the reed field, on his own ground, he was fast in a way that the courtyard ambush had not fully prepared Kliff for. He moved between forms, solid, then dust, then solid again at a different angle, with a fluidity that made tracking him a different problem from tracking the men on the mountain path. They had been soldiers. He was something else. The first exchanges were not clean for Kliff. He took hits. He gave ground. He was losing the early read, and he knew it. But he was watching. The same thing he did with the excavatron. The same thing he does when a problem does not yield immediately. He absorbs until he understands it. Then he parried one. One parry, followed by the blade. The devil felt that. Kliff had found the timing. The devil changed the terms. The dust spread, thickened, and out of it came figures, masked men, multiple of them, attacking Kliff from every angle at once. Scarecrow illusions built from whatever power lies at the core of what the devil is. Kliff worked through them. Not blindly, he was looking for the scarecrows, the ones the devil's power was running through. He destroyed them while managing the attacks coming from the real ones, one by one. The illusions collapsed. The field went quiet. The devil stepped back into the open. Real this time. No illusions left. This was a different fight from the one that started 10 minutes ago. Kliff was reading him clearly now. The speed that had been so disorienting in the first exchanges was still there, but Kliff had calibrated. He was seeing the openings, finding them. He parried. He landed hits in every window the devil gave him. He was not chasing. He was waiting, and the devil was starting to feel the difference. They charged each other. The swords met. The devil followed up instantly, a second strike. He moved clear of it, kicked the devil off balance, and took him to the ground. It was Kliff on top, bare hands, the kind of finishing that does not require a weapon. And then the devil got out. From under Kliff, with Kliff's full weight on him, he got free, got to his feet. He said, "You may be able to kill this single form, but you cannot kill me." Kliff swung. The dust went with the wind. His voice carried through it for a moment longer than felt natural. Something about the grudge living in every hateful heart. Something that was less a threat and more a fact about the world he had come from. Then the field was just reeds and wind, and Kliff standing alone in the middle of it. The devil had escaped. He was not dead. Andrew was going to make it. The wound had been serious. He would make it anyway. That is Andrew. Jan had made it back from the tavern. He looked at Marius's leg. He asked about it. Marius looked at him for a long moment, said nothing. The silence communicated everything. The camp was more full than it had been the night before. Ross, Carl, Dwayne, Jan, Marius, Naira, Andrew, who was technically horizontal but present. Still not everyone, not even close. The next morning, Marius had more. A lumber camp nearby. 2 Greymanes, Luke and Ronald. Word had reached them about Howling Hills, and they had not come yet, which meant something was keeping them at the lumber camp, or they had not fully believed what they heard. Kliff found them at the lumber camp. He told them about Howling Hills, about the land, the fires, the people already there. They came. The camp grew by 2. It sounds like a small thing. But every person Kliff brings back to that camp is a person who was scattered after the Blackbears and is now somewhere safe, with people who know their name. There were still Greymanes out there, many of them. The search was not close to finished.